for joining us. And want to kick us off. Again, I'm Frank McElwain, Director of Aviation at Garver, also the corporate board member for the South Central Chapter, SCCAAAE. Welcome to Conversation with Colleagues. Today, we've got a special topic about research in aviation. Garver is the sponsor this week, and with us from Garver is Nathan Paulsgrove. Nathan's got a background as an airport owner on the sponsor side at San Antonio Airport System, as well as his job today, which is a senior aviation planner at Garver. Before I turn it over to you, Nathan, I want to make a few announcements. First, I hope many of you were able to join us at the FAA Partnership Conference last week in Hurst. Going forward, chapter events, there's two I want to point out to you. Tomorrow, the General Aviation Airports Committee has a virtual meeting from 2 to 3, and the topic is airport fueling systems. And I think that's going to be of interest to a lot of people. Hope you'll join that. Most of you should have gotten an email about it today to register. Our next conversation with colleagues will be April the 11th. It will be sponsored by Burns and McDonnell, and it will be about resiliency. So put that one on your calendar as well. So Nathan, let me turn back to you and let you introduce yourself, your panel, and let's hear about research in aviation.
Thanks, Frank, and good afternoon, everybody. And thank you for taking the time to be here today. Like Frank mentioned, my name's Nathan Paulsgrove. I'm a senior aviation planner with Garver. I just want to say, I want to start out by saying it's a privilege to get to serve as the moderator for this distinguished panel that you have today. Research in aviation is a topic that I'm really passionate about. I've had the privilege of being part of ACRP projects and Paris projects and sitting on panels as well. And I've got something out of every one of them. And I know the three panelists that you have here today share that same passion for aviation and research. So today, I'm joined by Marcy Greenberger from the Airport Cooperative Research Program, Jessica Grizzle with the Safe Skies Paris program, and Dr. Nina Moleji from the MITRE Corporation. Each of them have a brief presentation where they'll be discussing current topics related to research in aviation. And we'll also have some Q&A. So first up is Marcy Greenberger, and I'll give Marcy's introduction. So Marcy is the manager for the Airport Cooperative Research Program for the Transportation Research at the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine. ACRP seeks to identify solutions for airport operators on a wide range of issues, including operations, maintenance, safety, and administration. Prior to joining ACRP, Ms. Greenberger spent over 18 years in operations and senior management positions at airports in Rhode Island, Indiana, and California. Ms. Greenberger is an accredited airport executive by the American Association of Airport Executives, holds an MBA from California State University, Northridge, and earned a bachelor's degree in aviation management from the Ohio State University. So I like how you capitalized it in your bio. And with that, I will start sharing my screen, and I will turn it over to Marcy.
Good afternoon, everyone. And Nathan, thanks so much for inviting me. I'll go quickly, tell you a little bit about the program and some information, some recent publications, and then we'll move on and I can answer questions later. So next slide. I do want everyone to know that actually ACRP is part of the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine, 3 honorific organizations whose members are invited because of their distinguished career within their specific field. And there are 7 program units, of which Transportation Research Board is one. And so ACRP is a program within TRB. And I do want to mention that it's also important to note we are not the federal government. We're a private nonprofit. Next slide. So as Nathan said, ACRP, the Airport Cooperative Research Program, seeks to identify solutions to problems and issues and challenges that airport operators are experiencing. And our program is driven, excuse me, by and for the airport industry and practitioners are a part of every step of our process, from the identification of the issues to selecting the project, scoping the work, selecting the contractor, and then overseeing the work and ultimately deciding and determining whether it's suitable for publication. Our funding does come from the FAA, and all of our results are available for free to be downloaded on our ACRP website. Next slide, please. Some of the products that we produce, or the results of our research, becomes guidebook, resources, playbooks, training, methodologies, and they come in a variety of different formats, whether it's a written report or a website or other tools. Some of our research results are actually used in college courses and a part of the curriculum, or sometimes it is, excuse me, the textbook. So while our primary audience are people who work at the airports, really the entire population of industry practitioners benefit from our products, and those include everyone that you can think of. Next slide. Really quick on the process. When a project is finally selected, a panel is put together. In the panel, as I said, they're the ones who develop the objective and determine what the scope of work is going to be. Through that, we get proposals, select a contractor, and the panel is going to provide that technical guidance and oversight. At the end of it, we have a product, and the panel then disbands with providing key comments and feedback to the contractor to help make the product even better. Next slide. I did want to share with you some of our most popular research topics, and it's terminals and facilities and environment. And in fact, our #1 publication has been for several years, for a long time, is actually report 25, which is on terminal planning. Which we're fascinated that it continues to be the most popular publication. In fact, you can see that on the next slide. These are the most popular research topics. Why does, I think I put that slide in there twice, sorry. Here's some, next slide, current projects you might be interested in. Project 02103, and the 02 indicates it's an environmental project, is a scan of technologies to remove residual PFAS from airport firefighting. It's not just airport firefighting equipment, but also in fire suppression systems, such as in the hangar and in the equipment and in other equipment. Project 0370, which is a planning project incorporating emerging technologies into airport and terminal concession programs. We have a current project. In fact, it might be meeting today, 0371, guidance for planning for future electric vehicle growth at airports. That project meeting today is selecting a contractor. Project 0433 is a guidebook for measuring financial benefits of airport safety management systems. We're expecting some regulation to come down, so this will hopefully provide another added incentive. Next slide. Some of our recent publications you might be interested in is Report 238 on the airfield design for large unmanned aircraft systems. Report 244, Advancing the Practice of State Aviation System Planning. Report 248, Airport Insurance Requirements. And Report 249, Developing an Airport Program to Address Human Trafficking. Next slide. Report 247, Airfield Pavement Markings, Effective Techniques for Removal and Temporary Application. Report 246, Airside Operations Safety, Understanding the Effects of Human Factors. Synthesis 120, which a synthesis looks at the current state of practice. This is looking at airport software solutions and services sourcing. Synthesis 121, managing a flight diversion with an emergency response at small non-hub or general aviation airports. Next slide. Couple more publications. We also do some legal research digests. Legal Research Digest 43 is looking at the legal considerations for telecommunications. LRD 42 is looking at data collection at airports. And Transportation Insight 1, which is a conference proceeding from an Insight event, which we did last March on the systemic inequality in the airport industry, exploring the racial divide. And lastly, an Impacts on Practice, which is a case study on how an organization has implemented some of our a product. And this one was on establishing health protocols during the COVID-19 pandemic at Laredo International Airport. I do want to encourage you that we do have an Insight event coming up in a couple weeks on airport finance, the future of airport finance. And next slide is we are currently collecting problem statements. Those are research ideas. That's what we call a research idea problem statement. So I want you to think a little bit about what your latest challenge has been. And if you think others are perhaps experiencing the same, this is an opportunity for you to submit that idea to be considered for selection as a project. That will happen in mid-July, and you'll start to see them in the first week of August, which is your opportunity to nominate yourself. But if you need some assistance, the 9 aviation committees, the standing committees, the TRB standing committees, are ready and willing to offer anybody help. And so the QR codes I put on the slides that I assume everyone will have available to them, you just scan those. It'll take you, the first one will take you on a problem statement so you can submit it, and the other one on the 9 aviation committees so you can reach out to them. Next slide. There are a number of ways in which you can participate with ACRP. We're always looking for volunteers, and like I said, that'll happen in August. That's your opportunity to nominate yourself. Obviously, use our material. We hope that it will help you. And then we want to hear from you how you've done it. We're really focusing on facilitating implementation, and we want to hear your stories, because we know by sharing your story, that allows another airport or another organization to be a little bit more efficient in their implementation because they can learn from you. You can, don't forget to take some time to submit a survey that comes from our contractors. It helps us have the data. It's more rich and robust when everyone contributes, and it means the results will be better and more applicable to the industry. So I know it takes a little bit of time, and we're all doing more with less, but if you can find a way to contribute by submitting your survey or sitting down for an interview, that would be great. And of course, submit an idea or submit a problem statement. For those of you who have not submitted a problem statement before or are interested, I'm happy to provide some proposal tips. Just reach out to me and engage with us on social media as well. Next slide. We did a survey of those who have participated in ACRP, and we asked them, actually we sent these to airport folks, and we asked them if they received any benefit, and they said that they do, and significantly in professional development, giving back to the industry, networking, and being on the cutting edge of industry issues. So I really want to encourage you to participate. I'm happy to answer questions when the time is right, but that's all I have for right now.
Thanks, Marcy. I should have mentioned this earlier, but I typed it into the chat. If you have any questions, please feel free to enter them into the chat, and we'll make sure to get them answered. We can have a little time in between presentations, but we'll also save some time at the end for Q&A as well. So if you have any questions, go ahead and start typing them into the chat. Thanks, Marcy. So next, I'm going to turn it over to Jessica Grizzle. So Jessica joined Safe Skies in 2006 and currently serves as the program manager for their program for applied research in airport security, also called the PARIS program. She oversees all aspects of the program, including problem statement submission and selection, project panel complication and facilitation, contractor selection, project oversight, and publication of the final deliverables. Jessica holds a bachelor's of business administration degree in corporate finance and investments and a master of arts in communication management, alternative dispute resolution. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jessica.
Hey, thanks, Nathan, and thanks for the opportunity to talk some more about the PARIS program today. I'm glad that Marcy went first because I can say that a lot of what she talked about applies to us in the PARIS program at Safe Skies. So before we get to that, though, I'll back up and just give a little bit of an overview, and that Safe Skies is also a private nonprofit. We are also grant funded through the FAA. And in addition to our applied research program, we do have a couple of other programs that focus on technology testing, specifically technologies that an airport might procure. So we're thinking perimeter intrusion, access control technologies, maybe even some employee inspections, things like that. So I know we're not here to talk about that today, but just want to acknowledge that those programs exist. If you have any questions about them, happy to chat about those as well. But of course, we're here today to talk about the PARIS program, our applied research program. So we started that program in 2014, and it is modeled after ACRP. So just about everything that Marcy talked about today also applies to our program. I will say the one difference is we are not part of that National Academies family. We are not part of TRB. We are a separate organization, but our process is the same as the ACRP process. So Marcy talked about, submitting problem statements. Oversight committee meets to review those problem statements and selects which are going to become funded PARIS projects. Then we put together project panels that scope the RFPs for those, select the contractors, and oversee the work. And then we publish those also for free download on our website. But here's where the difference is. Marcy covered a lot of topics, or showed you a lot of topics that ACRP covers in their research. And the one topic that we cover in the PARIS program is security. So all of those other things, all the other great work that ACRP does is super important. And the one piece that was kind of missing there was that security component. And so because we were doing security work already, the FAA came to us and said, hey, will you please start a program modeled after ACRP, but that focuses on those security related issues that airports are facing. So if we can go to the next slide, Nathan. So here are just some examples of the published reports. And sometimes when we think about security, it feels a little bit narrow, but as we've learned over these years of working on projects for you all in industry is that the issues within the general topic of security feel a little bit endless. So as you can see here, just to give you some examples of the types of topics that we have covered, obviously, security vulnerability assessments is a huge part of an airport master plan and a lot of other processes as well at airports. So we do have PARIS 16 that covers that. Employee vendor physical inspection programs, that's obviously becoming another topic of conversation of late as we are anticipating some potential regulatory requirements around that employee inspection aspect. So that could be a topic that we need to look at again soon, even though we have covered it already. The landscape has definitely changed over the few years since we published that. I'm thinking about ID media, so badge holders and accountability. How are you keeping control of all of those badges? How are you keeping your unaccounted for number of badges down? So that really is what's covered in PARIS 20. 25, security regulatory compliance at tenant facilities. Obviously, the airport has security responsibilities that pass down to the tenants at their facilities. And so that PARIS 25 covers a lot of the compliance strategies that you can employ for those facilities, thinking a lot about kind of agreements and contract language, as well as other strategies for compliance. One of the newer topics that I feel like everybody has been talking about for a while, but that we're finally starting to see some research on is airport response to UAS threats. Obviously, airports are limited in how they can respond because of, I would say, some confusion from our friendly neighborhood regulators, but also understanding that the airport role in that varies by airport as well. And so Paris 31 really focuses on you, the airport, making a plan for how you will respond, not how you're going to mitigate a UAS threat, because often that is outside of your hands, but making sure that you have a response plan in place that will help you appropriately respond to those issues as they arise. I think 39 is self-explanatory, airside vehicle access gates. There's a lot of considerations for those, not just the structures themselves, but procedures and inspections. All of that is covered in 39. And then a fairly recent one that we just published in December is force multiplier strategies for airport law enforcement. We are starting to get a lot more participation from law enforcement on our project panels and in submitting problem statements. And this really focuses on how can law enforcement leverage other aspects of their airport, outside agencies and things like that to meet their responsibilities at the airport. So many other topics that we've covered in the past, including exit lanes, access control systems, IDMS, ID management systems. I know a lot of airports are starting to think about those. So just some examples of the wide variety of topics that can still be covered within that security umbrella. Every year when we solicit problem statements, I'm convinced it's done and we've covered every security topic, but that has never been the case. And so definitely still a lot to cover within that security umbrella. And next slide, please, Nathan. So here are some interesting projects that are upcoming, hopefully soon for publication. So the first one is Paris 44, which is strategies for aviation security stakeholder information sharing. Something that comes up in every conversation that we have with every panel is the role and the impact of stakeholders at your airport, because obviously we talk a lot about direct airport employees and badge holders, but just the scope of badge holders at your airports and the scope of stakeholders at your airports seems never ending. So this project is really focusing on what role do all of those stakeholders play in information sharing to help mitigate security threats and vulnerabilities. So we're talking about all stakeholders from your federal partners, state and local partners, down to all of the vendors and concessionaires and air carriers, everybody that plays a role in security at your airport, even if it isn't an obvious role. So thinking about what kind of data do they have, how can that be shared with other stakeholders, and then understanding that some of it can't be shared freely. So then what are the strategies for redacting and sharing that information so that can still be of use? The next one I think is a pretty hot topic for a lot of airports in the credentialing space, and that is Paris 47, which is practices and considerations for centralized revocation database use. So the CRD is pretty new to airports. Obviously, this started as a recommendation from ASAC many years ago, a way to kind of keep track of people who are applying for badges at your airport who have maybe had a badge revoked at another airport because of a security-related offense. So this project is really looking at how are we going to use that database effectively. So looking at processes for how airports are you revoking that ID media and why? How are you entering individuals into that CRD so that the information that's in there is useful to other airports, because that is the entire purpose of the database, is to share that information with other airports. So what information do you need to enter to make sure that those entries are useful? And then how are you using that information in your subsequent ID media issuance decisions? Let's say that you have an applicant who has been entered into the CRD from another airport. How are you using that information? And then finally, 51, which is guidance for airport security exercises. Obviously, AVSEC exercises are something that every airport does, both tabletop exercises and drills. And so this is looking at what are those planning considerations. I feel like we talk about it a lot more on the safety side of things and are really still working on it in the security side. So what are the planning considerations, potential scenarios and design elements? I think a lot of airports are not struggling, but would like some fresh ideas of what they should be practicing in those drills and exercises. You know, active shooter, active assailant is something that we talk about a lot, but there are a lot of other scenarios as well. And then how are you evaluating those results and building your program after those exercises have been completed? So just a few things on the horizon for us. Obviously, we have tons of other projects in the works, and a lot of other publications that will be coming out over the next few months. But do want to just reiterate one thing that Marcy said about the benefit of engagement. That is something that I have heard from just about every panel member that's ever participated on any project, is being in the room with other airport representatives and your colleagues and being able to have those discussions and share your experiences as part of, you know, scoping these projects and drafting RFPs and all of the responsibilities that you have there can be really helpful, and not only building your network of colleagues, but also in just understanding that everybody's facing similar issues, and just being able to have an opportunity to bounce your ideas off of each other and share stories has been really beneficial to a lot of panel members. So just wanted to add on to that benefits of engagement piece that Marcy talked about. So I think that's it for me, Nathan, unless there are any questions.
Thanks, Jessica. And to reiterate what both Marcy and Jessica have said, I've sat on panels before, as well as serving as the contractor. I found it all to be incredibly valuable experiences in networking, getting to know people, understanding issues within the industry. So certainly second or third their notion there that it's a great thing to be part of. While we're talking, if any airports or consultants on the call have participated on ACRP or Paris projects, type it in the chat. Let us know what projects you were part of or how you were engaged. We'd love to hear some stories related to that. So, and also, of course, if you have any questions, feel free to type those into the chat as well. So I'm gonna go ahead and move forward to our last presenter, Dr. Nina Moleji. So Nina is a principal systems engineer at the MITRE Corporation. Throughout her career, she has supported several lines of business at the FAA, including the Air Traffic Organization, Office of Next Gen, Aviation Safety, and Office of Aviation Policy and Plans. Her experience includes leading efforts toward building demand modeling, traffic flow management efficiency assessments, and development of aviation metrics. Over the past 8 years, she is focused on uncrewed aircraft systems and advanced air mobility, which she'll be speaking about today, supporting key initiatives to develop strategic plans and operational concepts. In this role, she has contributed to several FAA initiatives, as well as state efforts, including the North Dakota Vantas Network. Nina holds a PhD in systems engineering from George Washington University, along with a MSA or a master's and a bachelor's in aerospace engineering from University of Virginia. So Nina, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Nathan. And thank you for having me today. So like Nathan mentioned, I work at the MITRE Corporation. It is a research organization, and I'll talk a little bit more about MITRE as a whole later. But I wanted to talk about a specific research program that I personally have been involved in for several years, and something that maybe some of you have been involved in, have not been involved in, and want to learn more about, and that is advanced air mobility. So if you could go to the next slide, please. So some of you may have heard the term advanced air mobility or urban air mobility. Some of you may not have. And so just to give you an overview of what this concept is, AAM is going to describe a variety of complex UAS operations that are going to range from highly automated to fully autonomous. And the missions and platform types are going to be much more sophisticated and complex than the operations that you're seeing today. You can see missions ranging from beyond visual line of sight infrastructure inspection, small and large package delivery, medical transports, and even passenger transports. And so what you can see here is a visual that's depicting what one of these future AAM integrated environments looks like. And you can see just the range of stakeholders and complexities that these operations are going to be integrating with. It's specifically focusing on the importance of those data exchanges amongst those different stakeholders, including airports, but also including air traffic control, third-party service suppliers, vertiports, and even the passengers themselves. So you can really visualize the level of complexity that we're planning for when we start to see these AAM operations integrated into the NAS. If you can click one more time, please. And so you can see here an example of some of the aviation challenges we can expect to see with UAM or AAM operations. And you can see some of the breadth of them, certainly going to have several technical challenges, but also including policy challenges and societal challenges as well. Next slide, please. And so for those of you who are not familiar with some of the concepts being developed today, I wanted to just provide an overview of some of the platform types that we can expect to see. And so here on the left, you can just see a few examples of some of the concepts being developed. I'm not going to go through all of these specific specs, but the important ones I want to highlight are most of these are going to be electric propulsion operations. And so you're going to see a need for electric charging capabilities to power these vehicles. They're also expected to be using vertical takeoff and landing or short takeoff and landing, and altitudes ranging up to 5,000 feet. So operations now entering into controlled airspace. Next slide, please. So I started thinking about what are some particular challenges that a group of airport executives may have an interest in. And the first one that was very kind of obvious to me is AAM vertiport placement and optimization. And so here you can see a need for understanding what existing or new structures can be used to establish vertiports for these operations. And so this is an area where MITRE has been working with different partners to understand some of the technical criteria that could be used to understand where vertiports could be placed. This is going to include things like where existing airports are located, airspace classes, obstacles, terrain, existing routes and approach and departure procedures, UAS facility maps, restricted airspace, and other types of technical criteria. Next slide, please. And so one specific example of that is that many AAM operators want to connect passengers to airline flights at airports and are looking for opportunities to develop vertiports at airports. And so what additional types of considerations need to be looked at for placing vertiports in this even more complex environment? And so here we're bringing in different types of data analytical tools, historic data about historic traffic patterns, airport runway configurations, runway use patterns, and pulling together different types of analytics to help inform where those vertiport selection processes could be made. Next slide, please. And so those are just a couple examples of what MITRE has been working on, but how else is MITRE fitting into this space? So for those of you who are not familiar, MITRE operates 6 federally funded research and development centers, or FFRDCs. And so you can see the 6 FFRDCs that MITRE operates listed here. And what that also means is that we are a not-for-profit organization of researchers. We're not going to be having any commercial interest. We're focused mostly on finding technical and operational solutions to a range of challenges. It also means that we can bring together stakeholders from multiple different aspects, especially ranging across our FFRDCs. And so when you think about a problem space like AAM, it is much more than just an aviation problem. And so then we can bring in experts in things like cybersecurity, healthcare experts for some of those mission types related to medical transport, networks and communication systems, and provide holistic integrated solutions to different challenges. So next slide, please. So what is MITRE working on in advanced air mobility? So here's an example, a list of some examples of what we are doing in this space. This is just a subset of many things that we're doing. And so you can see it ranges from strategy and concept development to some more technical areas like airspace integration and forecasting. We're also doing operational UAS and AAM support with, like Nathan mentioned, the Vantis network in North Dakota. And so I just want to conclude by kind of mentioning that AAM really is a wide breadth of technical challenges, and it's very early in the concept development right now. And so it's the best time for bringing together the multiple stakeholders that are going to be affected by AAM operations and hearing those concerns and addressing them now, whether it is from operators themselves, whether it's from local governments and cities, or in this case, airports. This is the time where we are really focused on looking at what industry is trying to do, looking at what government is preparing for, and then looking at all the other stakeholders to understand what those integrated challenges and integrated solutions could be. So next slide, please. So if you'd like to follow up, or if you have any questions we don't get a chance to talk about today, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. Thank you very much. Turn it back to you, Nathan.
Thank you, Nina. And thank you again, everybody, for presenting today, and then also for your participation. So I'd like to ask all my panelists to come back on video, if you could, and we will do some Q&A. Jessica posted in the chat about Paris 0041 security considerations for UAM operations at airports is expected to be published in April. So that'll be another great resource. So if you would type your questions into the chat. The questions can be for all the panel members or just select ones. Anything's fine. To kind of get things started here, I'll throw one out, and Nina, I'll direct this question initially to you. So a big question that I hear a lot from airports with, advanced air mobility, et cetera, is, we understand that this is coming. What should we be doing now to prepare for it as an airport? Would love to hear any thoughts, recommendations, et cetera, that you have related to that.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's a lot of things that airports can be doing. So the first example is, turning back to my panel colleagues and informing yourself with what is out there already in terms of research and studies that have been done. So I know there's quite a few reports and concepts that have been developed. And so if you're unfamiliar with some of those technical details, that's a great place to start. But when it comes to more tactical things to do, I would say, think about how, not just where your concerns are, but also where your opportunities are. And so, like I mentioned, having operations connecting airports to other parts of integrated environments is a key concept that I've seen multiple times with AAM. And that's an opportunity to see maybe connecting with your local government, maybe connecting with your state, maybe even connecting with the FAA to figure out how you can kind of capitalize on those opportunities for your particular airport. And then also seeing what types of technical challenges you might feel like you have to address now. And so that's where, an entity like MITRE or other organizations can kind of come in and help you to understand, if there is this opportunity space, how do we better understand what those technical integration challenges could be, and use, whether it's data-driven approaches or other types of technical approaches, so that you can kind of understand how those impacts could affect your airport, and also make sure that you're included in some of these conversations when it comes to different types of concept development, and not brought in later when concepts have already matured. Gotcha.
Excellent. Thank you. There's a second question I'll throw out there because I still don't see any questions in the chat. Maybe for Jessica and Marcy on this one. There's a lot of talk in the industry about, emerging technologies, whether it's AAM or other things, such as drones and some of the security things, that Jessica mentioned. What role or how much of a focus do you see applied research programs like Paris and ACRP having on applied research, or have on emerging technologies as part of future research projects?
I'll start.
Okay.
So I mentioned Paris 41 in the chat, which is really focused on the airport perspective of UAM. So just taking that for example, I think what programs like ours can do is just to help sort of set the stage for what those technologies might be up against in some ways, but then also how they can be used. So for instance, we have Paris 12, which was done, feels like many years ago now, but that was focused on how can you use a UAS or a drone in security operations, and what's the process that an airport has to think through if they wanted to do that. We've done something similar for autonomous vehicles, but for instance, with the UAM though, what we're really looking at is what's the realistic use cases at airports, right? What are those realistic operating models? What are the security implications of those operating models when you're thinking about passengers, cargo, potentially baggage that would go with those passengers? How are they transferring? So it's great to hear people like Nina and MITRE are really working on those more technical aspects. I think for us, our focus is really more on procedural and how those things might fit into the airport environment, and then what regulatory questions might exist, so that both airports and the developers of this technology have a little bit of a clearer path forward when they're making decisions.
Yeah, I'll build on that, because it's not only for us, ACRP, we can talk about the use cases, but also how to integrate and implement into your operations. One of the things that ACRP is prohibited from doing because of our relationship to the national academies is we will not do any type of consumer report type of comparing technologies or comparing proprietary products against another, but we can certainly indicate what features will do what features, functionalities one might consider when trying to implement and integrate into your operations. And I think that's what ACRP does really well.
Excellent. Thank you both. Again, if you have questions, please post them in the chat. Nina, this question's for you. Is MITRE 100% federally funded, or do you receive funding from elsewhere?
Oh, great question. So this is a little bit of a nuanced difference, but MITRE operates the 6 FFRDCs. So those FFRDCs are either going to be 100% federally funded, or a few exceptions, assuming that they are supporting that federal entity's mission. So like a state government, for example, might be part of that FFRDC. MITRE also operates a lab. And so the MITRE Labs is not going to be under the same kind of governing rules or restrictions that an FFRDC may be. So there's a little bit more flexibility under what that lab can get funding from, but that lab is going to be focused on some of the more core capability type research.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you for that. Any other questions? Right. I'll ask one final one, and we'll see if anybody else posts any other questions in the chat. But is there anything that you see as really being exciting? This is for all three of you, related to research in aviation. Anything exciting that you think is coming up related to research that you think will be impactful to airports, consultants, et cetera?
Well, I'll take a stab at this. We've been talking, the industry have been talking for a while about the shortage of employees that may be coming around. And I think that we have an opportunity to help start the pipeline a little bit earlier and start helping airports begin to think about developing their own pipelines as well. And, whether it's training or getting out into the community, it's a number of different ways. And I think, again, we can have an impact. And I think it's really all of us. It's really all of us. It's not just ACRP.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with Marcy on that. I know that's one of the issues that we have heard so much about in the last couple of years, particularly as airports are starting to try to get back to pre-COVID levels of staffing. We actually just drafted an RFP that hasn't been posted yet, which is workforce planning and development for airport operator security roles specifically. So I think obviously, what we're not getting into in that is anything TSA related. That's typically outside of the scope of anything we talk about. So we're not talking about TSO staffing or anything like that. But how are you as airports getting the right workers into your organization? How are you developing them? How are you making sure that you are providing a career path for them so that you're not losing them to other opportunities? And so I agree with Marcy that I think this is a really big opportunity moving forward to help airports really think more strategically about their staffing strategies, because it is, I think, a bit more of a limited pool than some other industries, but there are so many exciting opportunities. And so how can we, bring those opportunities to the forefront? I think that's going to be a really interesting conversation over the next couple of years.
Yeah, and if I could just add that with everyone having lived through COVID and knowing that remote work is possible, it makes it harder to attract people to come work at an airport since you have to physically be at the airport.
Yeah, actually, I was going to say just the kind of post-COVID impacts overall to aviation, just understanding, I don't think we're quite even at any type of stable kind of forward-looking, an understood position, but trying to wrap our arms around what those impacts really are and completely almost resetting aviation and air travel. I think it's exciting to kind of see where things will land.
Excellent. Thank you all for your responses. And in way of wrap up, first off, I want to thank my panelists, Nina, Jessica, Marcy. Thank you for your time today, and thank you for your willingness to participate in this. I don't see any other questions in the chat, so Frank, I will turn it back over to you, sir.
Hey, thank you, Nathan. Thank you, panelists. For our audience, again, thank you for joining us on Conversation with Colleagues. Our next one, again, will be April 11th, sponsored by Burns & McDonnell, and it will be about the exciting topic of resiliency. Before that, though, tomorrow you can join the chapter's General Aviation Airports Committee and hear about NFPA 407 in regard to fueling systems at airports. So I hope you all have a great day, and I'll see you next time. Thank you, everybody.